I am here with Dr. Jim Fadiman. Dr. Fadiman has his bachelor's degree from Harvard University, his doctorate and master's from Stanford. Dr. Fadiman was dosing people with LSD, studying creativity in the 1960s when the government crackdown came. Dr. Fadiman is the author of The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, one of the most important psychedelic books ever written. He is also the author of Your Symphony of Selves, Discover and Understand More of Who We Are. And he's also known as the godfather of microdosing. Welcome to the Worth the Fight podcast.
Well, what a pleasure to be here.
You know, I've been looking forward to this, our time together for many months, and such a pleasure and true honor to have you here. First question, what is going on with this cultural phenomenon around microdosing? It's thought that half of those that are microdosing in North America have started since the pandemic, and that number might even be larger now.
Well, let's kind of consider what it isn't. One is that is not fake news. There is a massive increase in microdosing. Two is it isn't any TikTok influencers. Okay. Also, it's no movie stars or other, and it's no political figures being caught. Okay. The possibility for the huge increase is that people are finding it beneficial and they tell their friends. That looks like what's behind it. Now, there's also a lot of media, about 90% of it is about high dose, but now and then they throw in, oh yes, the same effects seem to be possible with a much smaller dose, with an infinitely smaller cost, and with greater safety. So that's what appeals to people. It's the safest way to work on yourself using psychedelics, but let's get clear at the beginning, microdosing has none of the exciting effects of high doses. All it does is seem to make your health and your life work better.
Indeed, a wonderful answer. And you know, what I'm hearing is and what I'm seeing with my empowerment coaching business, my microdosing coaching, that this is the real deal. And this isn't you know, this is something that is so powerful that yeah, people are having these experiences, and it's spreading like wildfire, word of mouth. You know, people were in a you know, a crisis of connection, a loneliness epidemic before the pandemic, a mental health crisis. And when people, you know, embark on an earnest, intentional microdosing protocol, and it raises their vibration or boosts their mood, energy levels, you know, people are going to ask, hey, what are you doing? What's going on?
Right.
And
right. What happened to your 25 years of depression? And you say, well, I can't find it anymore. I mean,
that.
literally, people, particularly depression is the cleanest to look at, because what people say is, I'm back. You know, like, where have I been? And they also begin to get that they have begun to recover their emotional kind of capacity. Particularly if they've been on antidepressants, which depress all feelings. And people complain that maybe I'm not depressed, but I don't care about anything either. And microdosing simply operates entirely differently.
Indeed. Something that I've seen in my integrative coaching practice and microdosing coaching is that many of the biggest pain point that people are coming to me is trying to get off of the pharmaceuticals, these pharmaceuticals that no longer work, and they are still addicted to these pharmaceuticals, and using microdosing to titrate and to discontinue that. Can you speak to the potential there?
Well, no, I won't speak to the potential, but I'll talk to the reality, which is what you just expressed. See, we're all very careful to kind of not acknowledge that it really works, and it's okay to say so. SSRIs are very hard to stop using, even when they're no longer of any value. Well understood, well known. The pharmaceutical industry never talks about withdrawal, because that's a word about bad drugs, but they will say, they do use the word tapering, which is to get off of these drugs, you take less and less and less and less and less until you're no longer in danger when you stop. If you stop quickly, it's truly dangerous. And even the little teeny 8-point paper that you get when you get your prescription, if you read it carefully, it says, don't miss a dose, my God. So microdosing makes that much easier. And one of the reasons it makes it easier is you don't feel depressed. And the high dose work, beautiful work, John Hopkins and all the others, about an 80% success rate for what are called treatment-resistant depression. Treatment-resistant depression, which sounds like you're to blame, really is another way of saying the stuff you got didn't work. That's what that means. When you look at the microdosing data, it's about the same, about 80% success rate. The only difference is that the cost is maybe $10,000, even in a clinical study, it's even more, and you can't get in. And microdosing is available. It has almost no side effects. And if you're buying it, and you have to be buying it illegally, a dose of treatment probably is between $10 and $12. So we're looking at a vast difference in how effective it is and how much it lasts and how safe it is. So depression in particular is the one we know the best, because again, just as in your practice, it's so common. And the depression is, some people are just depressed, but most of the people that you and I meet are depressed and on antidepressants.
Indeed. Yeah, it's very pervasive. Thinking about a case study, a former client, let's call him Dan. He was on SSRIs for 30 years, and he used microdosing within the last 6 months to get off of that. And there was a peculiar or a fascinating side effect of not being on the SSRIs was he's a near 50-year-old man who has restored his libido and sex drive and sexual function. And that was, he was on all sorts of meds, and his focus was to get off of these SSRIs. And it can happen. Yeah. I mean, it's not an easy journey. It's kind of a harrowing journey. Like, I'm holding people's hands through this process, and it can be a harrowing journey.
Well, some years ago, someone wrote me a note and said, if they find out what this can do for your libido, you have a real product here, sir. Now, what we've found is, and we're not sure, see, what happens is people basically are in a healthier and better sexual relationship with microdosing. What's happened? Possibly they are simply becoming more sensitive and more aware and more in touch with their partner. So that itself is the feeling, and also maybe physiological changes. Most people who improve their sex life really don't care which way we describe it. And again, no one suggests you take antidepressants to improve your sex life. So
True.
Coming off them inevitably is going to increase your energy flow in all quarters.
Indeed. I appreciate that. This comes to mind. The notion of microdosing or macrodosing, doing this inner work, meditating, journaling, understanding our energies, that degree to which we can meet ourselves is the very same degree to which we can meet our intimate partners, purpose, and natural world. So there's, that's the angle that I'm seeing. And personally on my journey, there was sex before psychedelics, and then there's sex afterwards. And it's a completely different experience. I've done a lot of my deep healing work to reconcile the childhood sexual trauma in my nervous system and some of the past hurts and some of the blockages, and to reconcile some of my additional selves that we'll talk about, the symphony of selves, additional parts of me to better understand that. I think microdosing and psychedelia and meditation have helped that.
Yeah, once you realize that you can get back control of your system, then you look around and there's all this support, all this help. The idea of microdosing coaches is wonderful. Now, when I first was exploring microdosing, it never occurred to me that you could also focus and get help. Even though I had been one of these people during the high dose days that said, oh no, man, don't take it alone. Always have a guide, always have a guide. But when we got to microdosing, I kind of forgot for a while because the effects were more subtle and also over time. We mustn't neglect the difference between a high dose, which explodes and unclogs all kinds of things in your system, and microdosing just improves the effectiveness of the system to take care of itself. And that's different.
Indeed, absolutely. This comes to mind, the ability for microdosing to, we're leveraging the elevated neuroplasticity. So there's an opportunity for us to adopt habits in an accelerated time frame, but it's still going to take time. We're still talking, weeks, months before the magic will happen when people are deepening while they're microdosing, while they're also deepening into a meditation practice, maybe journaling for the first time, making a commitment to exercise and fitness, a commitment to being vulnerable, speaking their truth, to integrating their insights aligned with their intention. It's going to be a more gradual process as opposed to, like you said, the high dose, which you take the pill or you take the dose and you're blasted off.
Well, also in a funny way, with psychedelics high dose, we now have the term, and a good idea, integration, which is how do I deal with what just happened that is beyond my comprehension? Microdosing, we don't use the term integration because we're not finishing something. We use the term coaching or support or guiding. So it's a different model because you're working differently. And remember, neuroplasticity, which is the brain's capacity to grow new, better cells. And it's one of the few hard science things we have, which is if you take a neuron and you feed it whatever neurons eat, Purina and neuron chow, and then you also have other neurons and they get Purina neuron chow plus a microdose. These cells literally are larger, healthier. They have more dendrites, they have more little extensions, they have more communication capacity. If they had abs, they would be one of those ads that you see all the time of, whatever magic potion. Because here are these neurons with these great big abs, and they're just healthier. And that allows the system to become healthier. And of course, it takes a while to grow enough new neurons to tip the balance. And remember, the goal in microdosing, curious goal, is to stop, is to not need the microdosing to improve you, but to have your body and system set on improvement, which is why no matter what you're doing with microdosing, you take, the rule of thumb is start low, go slow, and take time off. Now, why take time off if it's working so well versus so many pharmaceuticals that you take every day for the rest of your life? And the answer is every group independently around the planet who's figured out about microdosing has come to the conclusion that you need time off. And that's time off to let your system know it's fine without the help. And then people decide whether they wish to microdose again, but usually it's from a different place.
Absolutely. What do you think about people that want to approach this like a lifestyle, but with taking time off? I've heard people that do 8 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 8 weeks on, almost in I'm going to do this indefinitely. What are your thoughts around that?
The answer is probably that's fine. I know people with 15 or 20 years of microdosing. They're usually rather remarkable people, but I'm sure there's lots of just plain us. It does no harm. And as long as the time off is built in, so you're not dependent on, but you prefer. And that's a great difference. Usually if you're doing it for a problem, maybe a physical problem, emotional problem, mental problem, when that's cleared up, then it's realistic to stop for that. Then you just readjust and say, well, now I'm a different person. What's right for me? If you actually want to lose weight and you eat really carefully and well, and you lose the weight. At some point, you say, I've lost that weight. Do I need to behave exactly the same way I've been doing, or can I eat somewhat differently and see how it goes? And that's really where I'm seeing it. So lifestyle feels a little extreme. I mean, I'm just, by the way, this is only coffee. Coffee is a popular, healthy, addictive substance. And people find if they stop drinking coffee for a while, when they return to coffee, it's quite different. So that might be, it's a kind of stretch of metaphor, but that'll do for now. So if I guess the question for me is always safety first and efficacy. So far, the safety of microdoses, let's back up again. Psychedelics, high dose, are among the safest physiological drugs we've ever found. Microdoses, which are much, much less, probably are pretty good, are even safer. Now, we don't know about anything taken over 20 years, but so far so good. And the people I know who've had it a long time, again, they don't take it regularly, but they take it when it feels correct. And there's a term out there called intuitive dosing, which is fancy for saying you take it when you think it's appropriate.
I appreciate that. I'm a big softie for love and romance, and I've seen multiple clients, a handful of clients in the last year, come to this path, come to the medicine path, embark on an earnest, intentional microdosing protocol, and find love. One person for the first time, she found love, first serious relationship. Another had written off love and thought that her days with feeling passion and romance were done. Obviously, a trauma response, and the ability of the microdosing to kind of open up her energies to feel safe in intimacy and connection. We were in a loneliness epidemic before the pandemic. Yeah. How do you think microdosing can help us connect on a deeper level?
Well, what we know is that, and when I say what we know, that means I've read a couple of thousand reports over the past many years, and lots of them have been about relationships. And if you're depressed, you don't want to be with other people, and being intimate exposes you to all of the defects that you think you have. It's dangerous to be honest with someone if what you're telling them is you're an awful person. Okay, so if you stop being an awful person, a lot of things begin to happen. And normal, healthy behavior is loving. We're designed that way. All living things are designed that way. And if you talk to people with a lot of high dose experience, even Michael Pollan, who is beautifully clear but didn't get to super high transcendent experience, he says, I know this is a cliche, but it's all about love. Okay, so as you become healthier, you are normally both able to love, and more important, you're okay with being loved. You don't have to fake it. And that's what intimacy is. Intimacy is, this is the real being. And I'm open. I don't use the word vulnerable because that sounds like weakness, but being open is like healthy. So what happens with microdosing, and again, people say, I play more with my children. Okay, that's about loving. I've got a dog. That's about loving. I take more time in nature. That's about loving. And the sex is better, which is a very, that's a kind of crummy way of saying the intimacy is deeper, longer, more, more kind of nourishing, and I'm not worrying about it. So all of the above. So of course, when someone comes back to life, like from depression, and she says, oh, I can love again. Or I've never really understood what this loving thing that everyone does, and now I get it. Loving is not love making may be a taught skill, but loving is is kind of behind breathing. Breathing is pretty natural, so is loving.
Beautifully said. I love all the examples, and that aligns with all that I've experienced on my personal journey and I've seen with my coaching. I'd love to shine light on the kind of the mainstream understanding of microdosing around psychedelia, and there's a lot of talk about the placebo effect, and maybe it's the placebo or the expectancy effect. And then I'm looking at those studies and think that they might be completely missing the mark with not focusing on intentional use. It's this idea of not neuroplasticity, it's neuroplasticity towards a directed aim. And of course, I don't think that we're going to find statistically significant changes if people aren't using this medicine to work on a problem, towards a problem of
Well,
an
have
intention.
some reason, have some focus, have some intention. Okay, now, unfortunately, you already answered it totally perfectly. That's my answer. And what's going on with, quote, placebo and expectancy and so forth? Let's go back a step. Placebo actually is positive. You want the most of it possible. It's actually the natural healing response. That's medicines try and evoke it. When you go to your doctor and he wears a white coat, that actually increases your likelihood of benefiting from the treatment. If he's taller than you are, you will benefit even more from the treatment. If you think your doctor, he or she, is famous, you will benefit more from the treatment. We are designed so that we look for ways to, the system looks for ways to improve itself. Microdosing improves your capacity to heal. So does natural healing response. Your goal is to increase your capacity to heal. Microdosing helps. So to me, and then the quote word expectancy effect, which I love, it's kind of, it's like inventing a new disease. Everything you do in life is around expectancy. We are going to have an interview. You're looking forward to it. Expectancy. It'll go better if you're looking forward. I'm looking forward to it. It'll go better. What if I think, oh my God, this is going to be a dreadful interview. He's going to find out that I've never been a vet, and he's going to lose interest in me because blah, 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 blah. And I can make the interview go badly out of my own stuff. Microdosing allows the system to work better. So, and if you actually look at the research on medications, and this is a little scary because there is, which is if you give someone a something and say it's going to help your depression, and you give someone an antidepressant and you think it's going to help your depression, and you have what, a match group and placebo and so forth, the percentage of people who improve on almost all against any medication is about 30%, meaning no matter what you're testing against, about 30% of the people will get better. Okay. That includes, there was a drug a while back called Midoxil. It would regrow hair on the top of the head. As you can tell, I don't think it was too successful. Okay. And I was in the store one day and I kind of looked at it and I read some of the 8-point type, which is just good vision. And it said placebo about 30%. I thought, wow, 30% of people put on water and they get more hair growth. And I thought, I want to make the product called hair growth placebo. Works for 30% of the people. So we have this incredible system, which we have denigrated, which medicine, it isn't even medicine. Doctors love it. Pharmaceutical companies don't like it because if you've got a 30% success rate for placebo and you've got a 35% success rate for your drug, well, that really means you have a 5% success rate for your drug, which isn't worth anything. So a little bit of an explosion on that, but the more natural healing response, the better. And expectancy, imagine there's a restaurant and 10 of your friends have said, this is a fantastic restaurant, that you're going to love it. You go to the restaurant, do you have expectancy? Yes. You go to a movie, other people have said it's good, or a review said it's good. You have expectancy. You're going to meet someone, you have expectancy. We live on anticipating the future, and we try and direct our lives so that we're moving towards what we think are positive possibilities. That's expectancy. So to make it suddenly a scientific problem, I think is a work of kind of evil genius, but it's pretty clever. Just happens to be pointless.
I appreciate you breaking that down. Much to think about there. I think you're spot on. Everything you're saying really resonates. I'd love to talk about the power of ritual, and how much do you think the power of ritual is coming into play with microdosing?
Well, there are two groups. Most people don't actually have a support system, have intention, have coaching. Most people still who microdose just microdose. So they're not aware of ritual. Ritual is a focusing of your intention. It's a bringing in the either parts of you or your ancestry or your tribal affiliation, and you're adding form to this system. It should help. Okay, why do people go to church on Sunday who don't have any particular belief? They say, I like the ritual. We feel good in a collective ritual. I would say that for microdosing, the question is, do I want to put it into, how seriously do I want to take it? The more I put into it, expectancy effect, the more I will get out of it. Now, the expectancy effect plus the work. If I go to the gym and I think it's going to help, it's going to help. If I go to the gym and work out, it's going to help even more. Ritual is the actual doing the work.
Love that breakdown. This comes to mind. I always share that this is a kind of a strange intuitive medicine in that it works to the degree to which we work it. Whereas the pharmaceutical, we're taking something from the outside. We're this hapless victim. This pill's supposed to fix us. But this intuitive plant medicine, benevolent plant spirit, the microdosing, it works to the degree to which we work it. That's what I've seen and experienced.
It works better. It has a base where it just works. See, one of the ways you check for all these questions of ritual, expectancy effect, placebo, is you give it to mice, or you give it to rats, or you give it to dogs. And you're pretty clear that they're not into ritual. And so if, for instance, if you're giving it to mice or rats, who you have managed to make depressed in some horrible way that I don't know, and they get less depressed when the group that gets the psychedelic is less depressed than the group that doesn't, that's intrinsic to the medicine. See, when we say plant medicines, remember, there are plant medicines in all directions. There are also plant poisons that are genuinely poison. So you got to watch out. See, got to watch out that you don't make ritual into the problem of, quote, placebo expectancy. Ritual improves, increases focus, has a lot of benefits. But there's a lot of microdosing historically, indigenously, that is not with ritual, and that has its effects as well.
Yeah, I suppose when I think about ritual, I think about how and maybe my perceptions are skewed a little bit because I'm seeing mostly from the coaching angle, and I'm seeing that the microdosing, of course, it involves a ritual of taking time to be grateful, to be present, to set your intention, but then how it helps us maybe makes our energies more sensitive to feeling the benefits or the positive benefits of meditation, of journaling, of getting outside, getting sunlight in the first hour of the day, per Dr. Andrew Huberman, exercising, moving our body, all these wonderful things.
And if microdosing helps you do all those, you do them better. And if those things help you microdose better, it just add that to the list. If you can do any of, there are about 6 or 7 wonderful things that would all help us, and microdosing is one of them. Microdosing works even better if you know what you're doing. Microdose works even better if there's ritual. But that's also true of exercise and diet and so forth. We're a unified, and again, we forget because we're in the United States, which has a medical system against plant medicine, because you can't measure it and you can't sell it the same way. 80% of the world uses plant medicine. It didn't go away. We're just caught in this little kind of Western science bubble. And most of the medications that we take are derived from plants. So we never got very far away from plant medicine, even though it looks like that.
Indeed, 80%. That's a hopeful number to think that perhaps our misuse or that we've collectively here in the West have gotten off the path, and that we can harmonize our imbalances to be more in balance with plant medicines, with nature, et cetera.
Well, it works better. See, if you think about it, a lot of medications don't help you at all. They suppress a symptom. I mean, they prevent you being aware of a symptom, usually for either 12 or 24 hours. There's no healing involved. One of the things that the SSRI people don't like to talk about is how come, since we've had SSRIs for now about 30 years, that depression keeps rising in the population. Now, when we got the polio vaccine, there was less and less and less polio. So you just got to look at, have we, and if you talk to people who are serious, they say, we realize SSRIs are an inferior medicine, but we had nothing before. So we now have high doses, we have microdoses, we have plant medicine. We also have learned healing through meditation, through a lot of other things. There was a whole period in United States history where nobody said exercise was good for you. And before that, no one ever said exercise was good for you, because everyone had to exercise in order to live. No one goes out to a farmer in the third world who is out there in the fields all day and say, you should really go to the gym. They're in the gym all day. Okay, it was this notion that somehow sitting at a desk or on a couch would be beneficial. And of course it isn't. You wouldn't do it to your dog. You certainly would never do it to your horse.
I love your analogies and metaphors. They're spot on. Very good. Brilliant. I'd love to focus on some of your pioneering creativity studies.
Yeah.
My understanding, it was in the 60s, maybe 1966 comes to mind, is when the government crackdown came. You were dosing people with LSD and mescaline, and not microdosing, but in the mini dose range, and were getting extraordinary results.
Let me just briefly sketch it out. We're working in high doses. We're working in very high doses, like 400 micrograms. We're looking mainly for transcendence. And then Willis Harman, professor at Stanford, and I talked, and he said, I bet it would work to help people with science problems. And I said, I think that's unlikely, because they would go off and trip. And he said, well, we could lower the dose. And so we worked out a design, and we tried it on people. And we basically said, you can enter this study if you have a technical problem in your area of expertise that has frustrated you for months. And we're using senior scientists who had not a lot of failure in their lives. And the reason for the 3 months and the frustration was so they'd have some emotional attachment to solving the problem. And we said, we're going to give you the most creative day of your life. This is the quote placebo effect. This is expectancy. We did everything we could to make it work, because that was our goal. And people came in with problems, serious problems in their area of creating equipment for the linear collider, dealing with an architect where the last 8 designs for this particular project had been turned down. Frustration. And we gave them 100 micrograms of LSD or 200 milligrams of mescaline. That's about an equivalent dose. They had what we now know as the classic system. Nice. We had a beautiful living room. We were the people that created the whole living room notion. with the eye shades and the music for a couple of hours. And then we put them up and said, you can have a little lunch. Almost nobody did. And now you get to work on your problem. And they would just dive in and start thinking and making notes. And they brought sketch pads. And after 3 or 4 hours, we said, now you guys, it was 4 at a time. You can talk to each other if you'd like, because some of them knew each other and they shared problems. They said how interesting it was. And then we had them go home with a sitter. And they usually stayed up till 2 or 3 in the morning, not working on their personal life, not seeing how the flowers smiled, but working on these problems. They were so excited. And we actually measured creativity for the next 6 months, and it basically stayed high and then went back to their normal high level. One newspaper report did it very nicely. 48 problems, 40 solutions. Those were patents, products, publications. That's what we did. And an awful lot of people in Silicon Valley who have created companies, when you ask them a little bit, say, well, I took a high dose once and I was thinking about this coding problem and how this product, and they would say how their initial vision for the product that made them a company came out of a psychedelic experience. So it's been replicated a lot in the real world. It has not been replicated in the science world. So again, intention, focus, it's everything that you do with your coaching people. Only we said we're adding enough, kind of mind power with this amount of psychedelic where you can have breakthroughs that you couldn't have before. And here's the one that I still don't quite believe this happened, but I know it did. Someone is designing a circuit, and a circuit has a lot of different parts. And you run a signal through and it does things and it amplifies and it does and so forth. That's a circuit. This guy would go and build a circuit in his head. He then would, in his head, run electricity through it, and he would watch to see where it failed. Remember, he just created it. And then he would design another one to deal with that failure and continue the study. So he was designing and designing and designing different circuits and testing them. And this is where, of course, is wonderful. How could he possibly, not know where the failure was, so to speak? But anyway, he developed one wonderful circuit.
Wow. Power of our imaginations, power of belief, power of set and setting.
Well, it goes it's a little more woo-woo right at the end, which is, it's really hard to imagine, how can I design something and I don't know whether it'll work, but I can, in my mind, this is mental, again, we have mental experiments all the time. But we also had someone who worked on the photon, and he simply put it through different changes, again, in his mind, and observed and made kind of notes and did a publication on another way of understanding the photon. And then there were simpler ones. One was beautiful. It was an architect designing a small shopping center. The client, he hated the client by now. So he spent the morning, he said, I toured the architecture of the world at all time during the morning. He just looked at beautiful buildings. And then he said, I saw the building that he was supposed to design. And so he did sketches, lots and lots and lots of sketches. And he said, I saw it, meaning it was as if it was fully built, meaning I went and I counted the parking spots in the little parking lot. I could tell you the size of the bolts we used for the overhead beams. And we were, very impressed. And so a few weeks later, he has this a real client, and the client kind of likes the notion. So he's making the formal drawings. And he did all the formal drawings, and the client bought it and so forth. He said, I never looked at the sketches I did during the day. And we said, why not? He said, I knew the building. So that was what the mind is capable of, with a little focus and a little intention.
Wow, that's powerful. I can't help but think how threatening and how the kind of the serendipity of having the government crackdown come exactly while you're doing that. It's one thing to study psychedelics and mental health and depression and anxiety and alcoholism back in the 60s, but creativity, that's a whole nother thing. And
yeah. And if you've ever been to Burning Man, Burning Man is what happens when you allow psychedelics and creativity kind of free reign. So many of the projects there, when you ask the developer, inventor, creator, he said, yeah, man, I just saw this thing and I thought, I think I can build it. You know, something 42 feet high that has got two naked women dancing and they move in the light and you can put a fire and so forth and so on. So envisioning is a practice. Children have it. We tend to kind of restrict ourselves as for certain necessary things. Psychedelics, literally, we know physiologically allow parts of the brain to talk to each other that usually don't. Out of that, something happens. Just like when you're going somewhere and you're with a group of people you don't know and you start to talk, it's more surprising than when you're talking with friends who you know very well. New things occur. Microdosing allows you to feel more comfortable inside yourself so that strangeness or newness or unusualness isn't threatening. So remember, mental illness very often is very stereotyped behavior. Is how can I feel safe? Compulsive behavior is if I wash my hands, there won't be any germs. They were kind of, before pandemic, washing your hands excessively was a mental illness. Then it became a virtue. So things change.
thank you so much again for breaking all this down. I'd love to shine light on, what's not, in terms of concerns in the psychedelic renaissance. Everything can be rosy and very optimistic. What are your concerns? What are we not talking about enough?
Well, there's a wonderful phrase, I'm not sure I'm getting it right, by Rabbi Art Green, one of the kind of psychedelic oriented religious figures, kind of the soulless, terrible soullessness of capitalism and big pharma. Remember, big pharma gave us the opioid crisis as a simply profitable thing to do to make it easier for people to die. Okay. And we punish them by fining them a small part of their fortune. And I kind of lost the thread. I get moved by how awful that is. Give me that again.
The concern, and perhaps it's that we're not focusing enough on the negligence of pharma, the greed of pharma, how they've set our country on fire with 100,000 deaths of despair to the opioid crisis last year alone.
Well, let me say it differently. The concern with psychedelics is, will it be used properly by the right people? And the right people, according to the physicians, are them. According to the research scientists, are them. According to the shamans, it's them. It looks like historically, psychedelics, when we look indigenously for a few thousand years, were usually by trained people, by trained shamans or medicine people. And they were, again, given to people who needed them when they needed them. There was very little profit motive. Right now, we're in this wonderful decline of all of the amounts of money that poured into literally over 400 psychedelic companies, most of whom have now gone out of business because the model for psychedelics is you don't need much, or you don't need it very often, or you may need it once in your life. The high dose breakthroughs, and again, you work with veterans. PTSD, once it's broken open, it can heal. And once it starts healing, you don't need to go back. You probably had a broken limb. I'm thinking of various things I've had. And as I was in my electric wheelchair at one point in my life, I thought, I'm getting better. I'm not going to need an electric wheelchair forever. And it made it very easy to, go around an electric wheelchair. And I was also looking at people who weren't going to get better and feeling the enormous difference. Psychedelics are on a getting better mode. A great deal of pharmaceuticals is hanging out and being a little less in pain. It's just a different model. And the problem may be we don't have an alternative. We don't have an alternative model. Again, we do in ritual of where to put psychedelics. We're going through the kind of medicalization route because the federal government controls things that look like psychedelics. Except, of course, if you're a Native American, where there's an exception, except if you're part of the ayahuasca churches. Now, if it was really bad for you to take it outside of a medical situation, we would not have those exceptions. So the need for the medicalization is not driven by the results or the substance, it's driven by the system. I mean, just let me add one little grumble here. Placebo studies of psychedelics of high doses are generally agreed upon to be pointless. Because everybody knows, you're in a room and you have the placebo, and there's this other guy across the room who's singing and crying and cheering and hugging, and you're thinking, yeah, my stomach hurts a little. Okay, there's this great New Yorker cartoon. It's a group of people, and 4 or 5 of them are sitting on chairs, with a magazine, and the other side of the room, there's these 6 kind of naked people all dancing in a circle. And one of the people on the bench says, I think we're the placebo group. It's a different model.
Love that. Looking ahead, and there's been, again, this massive cultural phenomenon, this big surge as we're approaching legalization, MDMA-assisted psychotherapy being an approved FDA cure for PTSD, possibly in the next year. And looking ahead and seeing this positive trend, going back to what we were talking about earlier, people having this microdose experience responsibly, sharing with their friend, getting the information out, getting the education out, more and more microdosing coaches, holistic health coaches coming in, walking this path with integrity. Do you see the potential of us harmonizing this imbalance?
Yeah.
Of pharmaceuticals with microdosing?
Well, if we change the model, let's say microdosing is not a pharmaceutical. Let's now say it's a vitamin. Okay. I mean, go to the store and you have, I'd like vitamin D. They don't say, here's the vitamin D. They say, here are 6 different strengths of vitamin D. And here's 14 different things with vitamin D plus something else. What would you like? That's not the medical model. That's the drugstore model. That's the grocery store model. When you have decriminalization, which is this fascinating term, which is if people aren't causing any problems, leave them alone. That's a very good model. And microdosing in particular, it's very hard to find a reason why someone should be prevented from microdosing. One can make a lot of arguments that people should be prevented from taking high doses on their own, just as we think it's not a good idea to drink and drive. It's not illegal to drink and drive. It's illegal to drink and drive if you do something wrong and your blood alcohol level is too high. So there are other models coming, and I think decriminalization and the fact that plants actually don't need to be manufactured. Plants also have never been told that they're illegal. So the question is, well, where are psilocybin containing mushrooms? Well, there's 200 species of psilocybin containing mushrooms. They grow pretty much everywhere but Antarctica. And they also grow in little home kits. And the kind of grow kit market for growing all kinds of mushrooms is probably growing faster than anything else. So it's a little bit like having, if I want really fresh tomatoes, I know how to grow them. And if I want really safe, fresh mushrooms, they're not hard to grow either. So we have other models. You can't grow an antibiotic in your backyard. You can grow, by the way, some plants that are natural antibiotics, but you know what I'm saying. So there are other models: decriminalization, religious freedom, basically even the coaching model. What's happening in Oregon is you can take psilocybin with someone who has coaching experience. They're not an MD, they're not a mental health professional, they're just someone who's had the coaching training. And I was watching Oregon, and I was saying, and I actually testified a little, how are you going to handle microdoses? Because that works, for a high dose of psilocybin. It's good to have someone there. It's good to have a room to sit in. It's a safe place. You need 3 or 4 or 5 hours. What about microdosing? And they really didn't know how to deal with it. So as I understand it now, the Oregon law is you can go into the same little kind of boutique psilocybin center, and you can ask for a microdose, and they say, here's your microdose. You have to stay here a half hour. That's silly, but it says, well, we use the medical model and we just shrank it. But it was because we didn't know what to do, because if we made microdoses totally just available, that didn't feel right either, and we didn't know what to do. So we're learning. And the nice thing about the state's model, we'll see if Colorado does a better job than Oregon in setting it up so people can use it. That's coming. And yeah, there'll be problems and there'll be backlash, and there will be states in the United States which will finally pass laws against microdosing for the same reason they pass laws against a lot of things they don't understand. But there will be other states that try other things. And more countries are also kind of relaxing from America's tight grip on the way they want to use psychedelics. And there's all the companies making all kinds of new molecules, and they will. Greed is a very powerful force in the health industry. And if people figure out how they can make money making psychedelics more available, they will apply that leverage. So we've got a lot of possibilities. I'm optimistic as the run gets longer, I'm more and more optimistic.
Love your wisdom. Thank you for sharing, kind of the state of the union of where we're at and how you see things unfolding. I want to be respectful of time here, but I also want to shine some light on your latest book, Your Symphony of Cells.
Yeah.
Discover and understand more of who we are. I listened to the audiobook last year, and yesterday I listened to about half of it in prep. And I had an aha moment this morning out by the bay while I was doing a little prep before our meeting, and was thinking about how the word harmonize is something that I certainly have never used before I read your book, and it's something I probably use on every coaching call. And that's really what we're doing with microdosing is we're harmonizing our imbalances, we're harmonizing our energies. And, I'm kind of tying it. I had the aha moment of your symphony of cells and kind of the harmonium that the conductor sets. And it was such a beautiful program and timely, and maybe too timely. I would imagine that as we wake up to the psychedelic principles and understandings, that people will be able to grasp and understand this more. Day to day.
And I have no theories, and we did our damnedest to keep theory out of that book. We have chapters on other people's theories, but the reality is that you are more than one self. That's just the way it is. And if you've ever been with your children and you're suddenly talking baby talk and rolling on the floor, or many people have a language just for their dogs, That isn't the same language. That isn't the same person that goes into the sales meeting and, we're going to destroy the competition through a pricing twist. That's just a different person, not a bad or better, worse. People get into a frame of mind. Actors understand that there's a shift as they walk on stage. They shift into the actor playing the character. And when you're in student drama, you will find that people often take the character off stage and it doesn't work very well in their life because they're only a college sophomore. They're not a banker or a pirate. So what we did was simply look at the reality that we change selves as we change situations. And there's usually a part of us that a lot of the rest of us don't like. Let us say that you smoke, okay? And that smoking has, one major side effect is you die. And you don't die easily, okay? And most of you doesn't like that, but part of you is addicted. Now, you can either hate yourself, which is in a sense also who's doing what, or you can say, there's a part of me that is addicted. We need to help. Okay. And very simply, okay, well, I'm a unified self. I don't know what you're talking about. Let me just make it really easy. Okay, ready? Have you ever argued with yourself? Of course. Who's the other person? Okay. It's that simple. And then you begin to see that if you can work with a part of yourself, you also can forgive the part of yourself. And then you start looking at somebody that you're close to, and you realize there's a part of them that you don't like. But that's just a part of them. Most of us have a relative we don't talk to anymore because of one thing they did. Or at a holiday greeting, don't bring up religion when Uncle Albert is in the house. Why? Because Uncle Albert is the evangelical Christian in the family, and he will then take as much of the holiday as possible to convert you, because he can't help himself when he's in his evangelical state. You don't bring it up. It's wonderful, funny, clever, interesting Uncle Albert who spent 3 years in Africa and has endless wonderful stories. So again, you're talking about lovemaking before and after. Who makes love? Okay, you'll find that it's not the same person who preps for this program. I hope. Okay, we shift, and those shifts turn out to be the secret to improving, first of all, improving your liking of yourself, which allows you to feel better about others, which allows you to function better in the world. And one of the ways I've learned, I had some physical problems. And at one point, I'm about to go on stage. There's 500 people. I don't know them. Okay. And I'm in the little green room. And I am physically quite ill. And I think to myself, I wonder what happens if I faint during this talk. And I thought, I hope I don't. But I was that weak. And I walked out and I sat in a chair. And I could feel a start of a shift. And I said something and people responded. And I was in an incredibly healthy, physically healthy self. And I gave a long talk and a lot of questions and a lot of afterwards people coming up, and I had energy. And a few hours later, it dissipated. But it let me see that the capacity to change selves consciously and carefully makes you function better. And what we say in the book, mental health is being in the right self at the right time. Okay. And one of the problems in military training is you're trained to be in a self who can kill people. It's not something you want to take out of the service. But as we know, a lot of people who come out as vets have all that training and they have no place to put it because they don't quite know how to compartmentalize. You don't throw it away. It's part of you. It's part of your memories. But we know all the problems that happen if you can't get out of the soldier self into the civilian life. So that'll save you buying the book, except for the literally 1,000 examples from 25 different fields. It's part of the human condition. We were looking for who else uses a term like cells, and we ended up, there's a page of 50 different terms that people have used to describe parts of personality, etc. Stop that. My phone is alive. So that's that side, and it fits into microdosing pretty much the same way, which is microdosing tends to heal a little bit of all of the cells. And the one that's in pain can be helped more easily. My friends who are therapists say, I say, do you have any clients who microdose? And they say, well, actually, the ones who microdose, they just do better. They work faster, they get through stuff sooner, they make progress more easily. They're just better at it. So that's what we know so far.
Thank you for sharing breaking down your symphony of selves. I highly recommend it to any of our listeners, anyone that is seeking to have a better understanding of the different selves, different parts of our nature. Appreciate you writing that book. I know it was a big commitment and sharing it with Jordan Gruber. You'd mentioned veterans. Maybe we can close out on this. Have you noticed that microdosing can be very helpful with PTSD, TBI, and I think on the pre-call you'd even mentioned spinal cord injury. Can you speak to that?
Let's know something I know about, which is TBI, traumatic brain injury, a physical injury to the brain, a concussion, a blow. Okay, we're talking super physical. If you have such, you have had rehab. And you have had all kinds of workarounds, the problems that your brain has, and other parts of the brain often take over and so forth. Nobody heals the part of the brain that's injured. It turns out, and I'm dealing with a lot of people who know a lot more than I do, that when you microdose, again, we talked about those new brain cells, you literally begin to get a restoration of the parts of you that are malfunctioning. Your speech can improve instead of being a little bit too sloppy. Your emotional resilience returns. And this is looking at people who have come to the place where suicide looks sensible because all the drugs the VA gave them just makes them feel terrible, and it hasn't helped. Or they're become alcoholics or drug addicts. What we're finding is that microdosing seems to physically return the brain to better functioning. And that's huge. Okay, we're not talking mental, we're not talking spiritual, we're talking physical improvement in functioning. And it's extraordinary. One of my mentors is Adam Brandage of Flow State Micro. And I've talked to him, he works with a number of athletes. And certain sports, you have a higher percentage of concussions. One is hockey, which is designed around being hit in the head. People literally can return to normal life where they couldn't before. There's a company called Wisana based on that. It's run by an ex-hockey player who moved from suicide to full functioning with psychedelics. So that we know. Okay, we're looking at some with spinal cord. We're not as sure, but I can give you where we are, which is I actually came across a little video on YouTube somewhere, and it's this guy in his wheelchair. He is totally unable to function below the waist, except when he takes psychedelics, and then his legs move. He doesn't run, he doesn't jump and run. His legs move, and they will move. They will continue to move. And we actually then, my colleague at that point, Sophia Korb, and I talked to one of the VA units that deals with entirely these kinds of injuries. And they wanted to fund a study because they also had another example from their own, someone in the VA system. So we're looking at the possibility of improving, not necessarily recovering in this case, but improving functioning, because if your legs move, the whole circulatory system is enormously, obviously improved. So we're looking at that. And we're hoping that people actually like you who are more connected into the vets world and into the Hearts and Heroes and a couple of the other groups will also be looking at that, because psychedelics have this notion, high dose, is they're about the mind. Okay. What microdosing seems to show is that the mind is, don't tell, but it's connected to the body. And it's actually, there's no little dotted line. So when the body improves, the mind improves, and vice versa. But in a sense, improving the whole body, the mind gets, doesn't have to do any extra work. So we're looking at that. And we have a few cases. So thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. Thank you for breaking that down. Thank you for sharing your grace and wisdom and insights, your pioneering work, and for all that you do for our human family, for the better world our hearts know, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. So grateful for you, and again, sharing your time and insights here with the Worth the Fight audience. Where can people find you? How do they connect? And how do they, where do they find your books? Your Symphony of Cells and the Psychedelic Explorer.
Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, wherever books are sold, as they say, which means a lot of you use Amazon and others of you get the pleasure of being in a real bookstore. Okay, I recommend both. At the moment, Jordan Gruber, who wrote Cells with me, he and I are now doing the book of microdosing. Because we've covered so many different conditions just in this hour, and we want again have the best up-to-date information out there, and so that's in process. What I would actually like, one is, don't ask me to do diagnoses. You have your host who can really help you, and I'm not a coach, and I don't, and never ask me where can I get drugs, because it's really hard to keep not knowing, but I'm still at it. If you have had something surprising in your own microdosing, jfadiman@gmail. Let me give you an example of surprise. Woman said, I've been taking thyroid for 20 years. My thyroid numbers are fine. I am tired all the time. My physician says, well, there's nothing we can do if we give you more thyroid. That's not good for you. And your numbers are really fine. So she microdosed and her fatigue went away. That's a surprise. And that's what interests me. I have a study now going on, not in this country, about people who are pregnant who are microdosing. That's fascinating. And I don't know much about it beyond that, but that's someone told me about it, and I said, let me help you put together a way of getting information. So we're all, if you want to help other people and your story is that interesting, let me know. Like that vet who moved his legs. Okay, he's going, he will bring on research that will help vets. That's what we do.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fadiman. Again, I appreciate you, appreciate your time, and I can't wait for your microdosing book to come out, and wonderful to hear about that. And again, wonderful to have this time with you.
Well, great to spend time with you, and great to, I can't recall when, I don't think I ever have a serious interview with a serious coach who really knows really lots more than I do about lots of it. And that was such a pleasure. And I'm so pleased with the work you're doing.
Thank you. That means a lot. Appreciate you, Dr. Fadiman.